Um, and pretty much it. It's been busy. I've played some games. I did mental health shit, walked around. This is going to be our last live on Neanderthal. And it's going to, or not on Neanderthal, but on this part of Neanderthal. So starting on Fridays morning live at 8 a.m., we're going to have the next in this series, and that part is going to be information about jewelry, cave art, and things like that with the Neanderthals. And then we're going to, I'm not sure what we'll move into next. We might have a couple of discussions about what we want to move into next. I am up over on YouTube as well. If my comments are off and you have questions that you need answered, you can go over to YouTube and ask. And also, the website is down for a hot minute, and then I'm going to have it put. I think I've processed through everything I need to do to get the website back up and running. So hopefully we'll be back up tomorrow, but I put the link tree back in the bio. As soon as the website's back up, I will have the link tree down and the website back up. And again, the website is just to organize things into tabs so that you're not searching through 3,000 websites to find the website on why DNA and Neanderthals. So that should be hopefully fixed by tomorrow. Hopefully it's fixed by tonight. And then let's see, what else do I've got going on? The book will be published by the end of the week. It is the first in a series. It is The Right to Life. It is short, and it is a discussion about the right to life and what it entails. And kind of where it's failing. It's political. I don't do political online as much just because of the fact that online it can cause bans, and I get banned half the time just for talking about science. So I try and stay away from the political aspect of it. So it should be out. It will be for free. It will be on Amazon so that you can get it off of Amazon for free to any of your e-readers. And hopefully we sell 5,000 in a week if we can. We'll like make a bestseller list for a free book. Well, we'll make the bestseller list, which free books don't generally make. So it is dissemination of information. The entire purpose of what I am doing is to disseminate information so that you can see, so that you can understand a little bit better, so that we can all understand, and to try and give voice to the things that I know so many people actually think and actually feel. They just don't have the words to put them into place. And so, and the information to get there. Hello. So that said, and it seems like comments aren't coming through, which is awesome. So, or not coming through, but not major comments. So we'll go ahead and leave them off as we go in, or leave them on as we go into this. The picture behind me is another one of Tom Borkland's works. I love this one. I've kind of saved it. But for me, there is this, she looks like my mother on so many levels. Like, and so many grandmothers I've seen and things like that, right? Um, and she is absolutely, you know, she's an elder, you know, she's a grandmother, you know that she has seen time. And to me, many of these are actually, hello, darling, I forgot to text you and let you know you can have it. um, Many of these are actually, I see them as female. I don't know why. uh, uh, One I've saw is very masculine, but this and the one with the deer I really saw as female. But this I see very female, and to me she's a grandmother who stood the test of time, right? The weathering of her skin and the weathering of her face. One of the things that they say about Neanderthals is that, and early Homo sapiens, is that we kind of developed our own sun protection, and this is kind of like a layer of dead skin and oils and stuff across the top of our skin. Um, and this is why we would have, if we're looking at people, thought that people looked older than we were through, again, our eyes, not theirs. They would have thought that that was the natural look for somebody of that age. Thank God you got a little bit of your weathering so that you didn't burn, right? So when we look at pictures of like Denny and stuff like that, and Denny looks so old in the one that we have, right? That reconstruction that's based on, I think he AI'd it. It's not my favorite versions of the reconstructions. It looks very lowbrow trailer park. Like to me, it's just there's problems with it. I totally got why people were like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I was like, you shouldn't talk like that. But yeah, okay. So I don't like that about that person's reconstructions is that they often don't have the humanity in them, and they often have this very sordid look to them. Um, but uh, the older look for a child would have been probably likely because of the fact that they have this kind of layer of dead skin and oils that they're developing across their skin that and again as did we, that is creating that barrier between them and the environment. It's creating safety. It's creating a healthy biosphere of you, right? And so, it, you know, I love to see the weathered. I love to see the old. I love to see the grandmother. I love to see, especially knowing that this happens, especially knowing that we have two finds that are around 50 years old of older Neanderthals who have been injured and who have carried on living after injury, right? So I love this. That's another thing that we'll get into. Probably it might be next. Probably medicine and science with the Neanderthals after the decoration and art. Um, but I think that uh, it's one of those pictures that kind of represents that. Sorry about the background noise. So with this picture, this is the last of our series, and I saved our elder for last. Um, I can pull up the others maybe at some point if you wanted to see them again. Trying to see if I have a lighter so I can light these candles in here. Um, but we should get into the DNA and what the DNA with Neanderthals and what the ancient DNA that we're finding kind of tells us about the region and the world that Neanderthals were living in. So Neanderthals again start about 600,000 years ago at our current oldest time period. And this started 600,000 years ago is again in Europe, in Eurasia. So we're looking at from roughly the Middle East west. West, directionally challenged, along with geographically challenged and mathematically challenged. Um, but what we're looking at is the Middle East and West. And you're seeing that our current oldest find at 600,000 years ago is actually in Britain. We know that the Neanderthals were in Britain. And then when Britain was covered with ice, they were driven out. And then when Britain receded out from underneath the ice again, or the ice receded and Britain was exposed, Neanderthals were unable to make it back because Doggerland didn't exist, water covered between Western Eurasia and Britain, the British Channel. And we know that the ice age came again and drove them down into the lower parts. And then we know that they went back up at the receding of the ice age and then came back down and died off at that last one. So, with that, much of this, the oldest find is absolutely like our oldest absolute Neanderthal we have so far. But much of our evidence of how many there were and the different patterns of humanity around them and the different peoples around them comes from DNA. Now, DNA for ancient beings is something that we've really only been able to do for roughly the last 20 years or so. Uh, Svante Pablo just won the, sorry, has to settle in sometimes. Svante Pablo just won the Nobel Peace Prize, almost like gold medal, for the invention of ancient DNA uh, polymerase chain reaction, the ability to actually test ancient DNA and finding the Neanderthal genome. Um, this polymerase chain reaction actually changes DNA across everything. Like it causes or it creates a lot of advancement within DNA across all boards, but is very significant in ancient DNA because DNA, like all substances, has a half life. And a half life is the rate of time it takes for it to degrade. If you start out at, well, you're alive, is better to say, your DNA is replicating constantly. Your DNA actually replicates roughly every 7 years. You have a full replication of self. So while you're alive, this is constantly happening. But the moment you die, this goes into a half life phase. What a half life phase is the rate of time it takes for it to degrade by half. It's shared by all chemicals, all different things across the globe. It's how we rate carbon 14. So if your DNA, and these numbers are arbitrary, they mean nothing, it's just easy. If your DNA is 100 strands when you die, and your half life is a day, the first day you're going to lose half or 50. And the second day, and you're going to end your day with 50. And the second day, you're going to start with 50. You're going to lose half or 25. And you're going to end your day with 25. And the third day, you're going to start with 25. You're going to lose half again. And you're going to lose 12.5. You're going to end your day with 12.5. You can see how it degrades pretty fast, but you can see how little flakes can hang on for a long period of time. But when you're testing DNA and it's not in a living being, you have to destroy the tissue that you're getting the DNA from, which you have to do even with a living being, but we can do it with saliva, right? But with something that's dead, you have to destroy bone or tissue, right? And what it is say you have a bone, you're going to grind up that bone, thank you, and you're going to put a solution in that. And the solution that you're putting in it, you're going to put that whole thing in a centrifugal thing, and it's going to spin it out and it's going to tease out particles of DNA. So you destroyed the bone to get to that point, and then you have maybe a couple of strands of DNA. It takes several strands of DNA to test, to run one singular test. And when you run that test, you destroy the strands that you're testing. DNA testing is a very destructive process. So until the invention of polymerase chain reaction, PCR, we weren't able to test the fragments that we get because we got so few fragments. Polymerase chain reaction takes those few fragments and replicates them by millions. So now you have millions and millions of pieces to test. At this point, you can test anything you can get your hands on, and that's kind of what we've been doing. This is how we found new species like Homo denisovian. And this is how we've gotten a wealth of our information, not only about Neanderthal, but about the other species that lived around Neanderthal and around us at this timeline. So again, Neanderthal starts at around 300,000 years. And during that first 300,000 years, we're not around. There are archaic us, maybe, like Homo heidelbergensis, or earlier groups that may have later become us, but we are not around. Currently, they're actually looking at the possibility that there's an earlier group that may have become us or been our ancestors that they met with and replaced their Y DNA with, because we cannot find a Y DNA for Neanderthals. We have found Y DNA within Neanderthals, but the DNA that we find within Neanderthals is more closely related to sapien than it is to Neanderthal. So, when we're looking at this, we're also able to see the other species that they possibly interbred with. We've talked before about ghost species. Ghost species are a species that you see a fingerprint of in the DNA, just a little tuft of it, but you can't see the whole genome, so you don't know anything really about them. You may know a couple of genes that they attribute, but that's pretty much it. And because we haven't found them in the fossil record and been able to get a DNA test from them in the fossil record, we also aren't seeing the ability to know anything about them, right? So we just have this little fluff. within us. And we know of five within us, and we know of one within Neanderthal and Denisovian. There seems to be a couple others coming out of the word work as we speak. There's been the thought that there's one in West Eurasia right now that they're looking at. Um, and I'm not sure yet if that's one that they think mixed with us or one that they think that mixed with Neanderthals. There seems to be another one that they're looking at. And so there's possibility of even more as we move along. The other thing is that we have something called the Boynier mandible or Boynier jawbone. And the Boynier jawbone is a mandible, this piece of your skull, that has no derived or only attributed to Neanderthal characteristics, but also does not have the Homo sapien chin that all Homo sapiens that we know of from our very earliest of our species have possessed. And that's that mental eminence and why we're wise. Sapien meaning wise, right? And so this portion is not on that mandible. This was found in like 1887. So it doesn't have DNA to test anymore. It's not something that we're going to get DNA out of. Um, Possibly we could find another jaw shaped similarly shaped and having the same characteristics as this one, and then take a look at DNA within that and define a new species. Or really, if we find another jaw that looks like this, we're kind of going to go, well, that's definitely another species, right? Um, of the mandible, it's the jawbone on this. And what it is, oh, or do you mean of the mental eminence? I don't know. And I don't think anybody really knows what the function of the mental eminence is, right? And why do we of all species have it, right? Like, why are we the only species that we see this in, right? Not even any of our ancestors do we see this in. Not even Naladi do we see this in, right? And they have this same brain shape that we later develop. Um, so it is curious. It is curious to know. But with the Boyner jawbone, if we could find another one, we could either know, yes, it's another species, or maybe find out that it's half of two different species, half sapien and half something else. Maybe. Oh, that's cool, Reba. That makes sense. Visiting Yellowstone, they told us the DNA multiplying enzyme came from a geyser there. That makes sense. I mean, um, the DNA multiplying enzyme would be millions and millions and millions of years old. So at the time when all the continents, and the continents have been one large continent several times, like Pangea is just the last. Like they've been several supercontinents several times, and they will be again. So it's possible that that is like the origin of it, right? That'd be really cool to know. I'll have to look at that. DNA again, not my real special, or not something I'm really good at. But with what we are seeing with the Neanderthal DNA, what we are seeing is that there is a possibility that there's other species out there. There's not only the possibility that there's other species out there within DNA, but we have, like I said, found that jawbone, and we're not sure where that's coming from. Um, and not only within Neanderthal DNA and or Denisovian DNA, but within our DNA, right? And in the last 5 years, 10 years, last 10 years, we have found 4 species in 10 years. We found Naladi, well, we found Denisovian in 10. We found Naladi in 12. And then we found Lazonsis and Longi in the last couple of years, right? So 4 species in 10 years is a lot, right? Especially when we went 150 years with only Neanderthal that was like next to us, like with us, right? So this is totally a huge shift. With the Y-DNA, they're seeing that it's possible that there's a replacement population of Homo sapien ancestor in Europe that gives Neanderthal their Y-DNA, and that's why the Y-DNA that they see in Neanderthal is Homo sapien Y-DNA. Um, they did say, and I was looking, that there was a recent find that shows that like 400, no, 350,000 years ago, they were able to uh, track a Y DNA, but the Y DNA was Denisovian Y DNA. They weren't tracking a Neanderthal Y DNA. It doesn't seem that they have a DNA that is specific to Neanderthal that is Y, that they can find at any point. All of them seem to be DNAs that are specific um, to Denisovian or us. And when we look at this, so the gene, the SR, now this is very fragmentary and very surface knowledge. There's a gene called the SRY gene, and it codes for the DNA. We've watched as our Y DNA, which used to be an X and lost one arm, has lost the upper half of it, like it's shrinking over time. Um, and as we're looking at this, we're seeing that the SRY gene that holds this code actually has, to my understanding, it's other genes on it that can replace that. Um, Now, it would not mean that males are gone. It just means that the gene that males are passing on is a different gene. That's all. So, what it's saying is that, so currently the Y only codes, the only thing that it only codes for is switch of gender, switch of biological sex, not gender, switch of biological sex. It has about 55 other things on there that are all useless. And then it has a couple of things that now code on other genes that come from the X. So it's not necessary in that level at all. It's just that switch. So something else can afford that switch and maybe give different ways of doing it. And I don't mean structurally. I mean, say that it switches to the X. Say that, and this again, fragmentary surface, and just arbitrary. If we were to hypothetically say that the Y gene codes for higher testosterone, and that is the gene that comes along with that switch to male, um, if that switch to male were to happen with the X gene and the ability within the X gene, um, and it came across with a lower level of testosterone and a more even level of estrogen, if, and I'm not certain, but if the idea of aggression being linked to testosterone is real, then having a lower level of testosterone and a flatter level of estrogen might actually start to remove the level of testosterone and therefore the level of aggression. Now, again, please don't take that as fact. Please don't take that as that is a thought experiment. That's a, okay, well, it could go this way, or what if, right? So please don't go, well, Widda said, because that is not what Widda is saying. But it could be something along those lines in my understanding from the reading, that it could be seeking for another way to code that switch that is getting rid of some of these, God, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, faded out need, and that's not the word. But as things fade out of their need, right? Something that is no longer needed as much within our species. And as that's fading out, they might find that it comes in on a switch in a different level. So, with that, um, it could possibly be that this happened with Neanderthals as well. But because they're still so, if Neanderthals became XX for both male and female, and that's not what actually codes it, like an XY, right? That would not state that they could not have sex with with Homo sapien or Denisovian men and get their Y DNA. What it means is that the DNA that is Y within them is not Y. It's another gene, allele. So that's the Y DNA and the breeding it out in Homo sapiens and the possibility of it being bred out in well, not bred out. Sorry, and bred out is the wrong terminology. The deletion of it within Homo sapiens and the possible deletion of it within Homo neanderthalis. It has been done for two species of rodents. And basically, what they did is they still have male and female. It is just that it's a different gene, not the Y chromosome. It's a different chromosome that codes it. Um, so the last thing that DNA really tells us is that Neanderthals were populous originally, like genetically diverse originally, had a higher level of genetic diversity. And then they went through two almost extinction events. And in those two almost extinction events, their genetic diversity narrowed to the point that the last one at 100,000 years ago left them so genetically narrow, lack of diversity, mono genetic, that they were very inbred by the time they ended up dying off. Now, this happened a couple of times, and in the first instance, they saw that there's a lot of inbreeding going on as well, and that the repopulation in the first instance comes from mixing with Homo sapiens and Homo denisovians. That mixing with Homo denisovians and Homo sapiens gives them the ability to repopulate during a glacial minimum, and then gives them the ability to, in turn, um, after that repopulation and that mixing, when the next glacial maximum is happening, is when you're seeing, well, actually, we're seeing them die out at about 30,000 years ago. So at 30,000 years ago, that glacial maximum is starting to recede for the final time. But we're seeing that 100,000 years ago, when it's going into that glacial maximum, not quite there, but going into that, you're seeing them being pushed south and them dying down. And in that time, after having repopulated by mixing with sapiens and mixing with Denisovians, that secondary died down. They become extremely inbred. We're looking at cousins, aunts, nephews, different things along those lines. Um, all of the family groups at this time seem to be extremely genetically narrow, unless we see an influx within the Y DNA that increases that genetic diversity. The other thing that we see is they seem to, their uh, females move to male family groups. So, oh, I can't remember the name that they use for that. Uh, hmm, nope. So I can't pull it. But the women will move from their family groups into the family groups of men, and it'll be fathers and brothers and cousins in the male group, and new women. So from an outer family group, of course, at this point, you're also seeing that they're extremely, very narrowly, genetically diverse. Like, they have no genetic diversity. So they're still cousins, right? There's still several small bands of just different cousin groups. There's several small tribes, family groups of families that are all extended families. Um, but you are seeing that the women are going into new homes, right? Um, this is also something that you see when you see polyandry. When you see a woman moving into, so polyandry is one female, multiple male. Oftentimes it is a family arrangement. So a family might have five sons, and a woman will marry all five of those men, and it'll be one woman and the five brothers. Um, Polyandry either happens within familial groups like that, or in other cultures, it can happen differently. One specifically that I'm thinking of that it is within familial groups is within the Tibetan range. Um, and the land stays within the masculine line, um, and all of the men are working the land. So it's very beneficial because you have multiple strong bodies to work the land, right? It's also beneficial in ensuring that uh, you don't have a fight over inheritance between siblings, right? The oldest brother inheriting everything and the second brother having problems with it, right? It's also keeping down your population instead of all 5 of those men going out and impregnating 5 women, or all 5 of those men going out and impregnating 5 women each, right? You're seeing that your population growth is a little bit narrower, right? So it could possibly be that you're looking at something along those lines. That's my personal thought and spin on it when I read about it. That is not something that I've seen in an article. I did see in the articles that they are showing that women are moving to male family groups and that it is, fathers and sons and cousins within the male family group, and then an outside female, though, again, typically a cousin who is coming into the group, right? So, with all of this, this gives us a pretty broad picture of the other types of peoples and groups of humans, um, and the DNA, what the DNA story tells us about the not only multiple almost extinction points for Neanderthal, but about the existence and interbreeding with us and with other human species. I'm going to go ahead. I don't have to open it up. It's been pretty quiet, which is just so weird. There's been nobody talking, which is absolutely weird for my lives. I'm totally down, but like I'm like, wait, what? Okay, seems to be. Are there any questions on the DNA and what the DNA tells us? I'm probably, there's probably a couple of things that I could really have some information on. I'm just not thinking of them at the top of my head when it comes to this. Um, it's not subscriber only though. Like I don't have the option for subscriber only this time around. Hmm. And I thought I had seen a couple of people who were not subscribers who had talked, but maybe not. Okay, so I am not sure what's going on, why it's not allowing me to turn it off. Yeah, okay. It won't let me, it's not even showing it that way. That must be what it is. I've been wondering this whole time. I'm like, how come it's not? I'm going to restart us. I'm going to restart us. So come on back in like 2 seconds when you see me come back up and see if it's that. It's not looking the normal way either. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I'll go ahead and restart it, everybody. Yep, yep, yep. Sorry, guys. I know I'm paused over on YouTube too. Um, I'm trying to see if you pop up in TikTok, please go ahead and message something and let's see if it will actually like allow it. I'm not sure why. I had to turn off subscriber only completely, like, and but usually it doesn't like let me let me see if it's off here. And I apologize, YouTube. I know that this is okay, perfect. I don't know what that was. I think it is better now though. It just wouldn't let me turn on comments. Like it said that it didn't have subscriber only on it. I was wondering, it was really fucking quiet for 200 or 300 people in here and comments being on. What will differ when we become X chromosome only? Thank you for coming back. Sorry about that. I did not realize. 'Cause usually it's not that way. So first I want to say that I do not know if we're going to become XX only. Um, there's possibility that there's other chromosomes on there that will work the same that code. I do not know enough about it. Right. I really don't. Um, and what will differ? I would say that we really can't tell until we know what it would turn into, like what chromosome would take over. Is it an X chromosome? Is it a different chromosome within that space? Um, in not knowing, um, yeah, I don't. What I would say is that it's going to depend on what chemicals the different chromosome really codes for and what it really states. But I would state that we're probably not going to change genitalia too much, though we do kind of shift genitalia too, right? If you're not aware, but we're not going to like. It's probably not going to be that all people with penises are gone, right? I'm going to assume that people will still have penises and be born with penises, right? And be born with testes. It's just that the testes might be coding differently, right? Um, to my understanding, the other species that this has happened for, like the rodents and stuff like that, they're still male and female. It's not like replication. There are species that do not have a Y, they are double X and they can replicate. So if we do become a double X, it could be that, but I'm not sure. And it is going to take a hot minute. So this is not going to be something we see in our lifetimes. And if we kill ourselves off first, it's not going to happen at all. So we are in the middle of an apocalypse. So if it kills us off first, we might not see it at all, but it could be a few different things. Again, sorry everybody about the comments. I didn't realize why. When someone sees Neanderthal ancestry, how far out are we talking? Neanderthals died 30,000 years ago. 100 generations is 2,500 years. You have all of my calculating equipment. um, 1,200 generations. So your 1,200th great grandfather. Your chromosome. I can't remember. It is so you have 23 pairs, so a total of 46, and they code everything. The one thing that is not a pair is your 22 pairs. 22 pairs, 23 pairs, 22 pairs, and then the 23rd is not a pair. So a total of 46. The one that is not a pair is the XY, and it used to be a pair, and then part of the X gene faded and disappeared, and that's how it became a Y. I'm not knocking indigenous people. Are you Turtle Island indigenous? I'm actually Turtle Island indigenous, and this is a Neanderthal behind me. Why would you automatically assume that this person is indigenous? Would be my question. 1,200 generations. Is it 12? Yeah. I can't explain giants. I have my opinions, but I can't explain giants. Okay. Comment seem to be working just fine. Okay, so if you had questions for the DNA, I'm going to leave the questions on for a couple more minutes, and then I'm going to go ahead and turn them on subscriber only, and I'll go ahead and answer the questions that are there. I bet it is quieter over on YouTube, Emily. It is very much quieter over on YouTube. Finding giants did not destroy evolution of humans. This species is not around today. This is Homo Neanderthal. This is not on. This is, yes, it is my portrait. Actually, she looks a lot like my mother, except for, the obviously Neanderthal characteristics. Why do we not have the cheeky, oily skin to protect us? Because, oh God, what did that article say? There was a journal article of a study on it, but then there was a couple of articles I read on it, and it was talking about, so I think what it is we started washing it off and getting rid of it, and when we started washing it off and getting rid of it, we stopped using it, and so it's no longer develops. But I think that there's a chemical within it that was a little bit different than what we have now, and that chemical is no longer there, or something that we're giving off, like secreting, that we're no longer secreting. But I think it comes from the fact that we stopped utilizing it. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and turn off the comments in about 2 seconds here, and then I'll go ahead and go back through them. I don't know how unmarried females fit into a polyandrous society. I mean, I think pretty much any, society. Well, first of all, I think that a wife in that is probably pretty highly prized. Um, and I believe that in the studies that I was looking at, they talk about that there's a lot of prizing of the wives. The home is theirs, the land is theirs. They pass it on to their children, right? So they move in and this becomes theirs, and then they pass it on to their children. But since the children are all the same family, right? So, okay, I'm going to turn it off. And go back through these. There's not hundreds of people for now. Yeah, I'm not sure we're ever going to get to hundreds of people on YouTube. I'm kind of not looking forward to hundreds of people on YouTube. Let me go through. I'll have to learn how to use YouTube enough that I can figure out how to deal with hundreds of people on YouTube, right? Okay. Is that just because our Y breaks down until just the top is left and then it merges X? Um, so my understanding is the Y is a broken X to start with. And it's starting to, so you've got and it kind of looks like a Y. Okay, so what it is that you have an X, and all of your other chromosomes are X's. They all look like an X. Every single one of them all pair up on an X, I think. Wait a minute, there might be one that's not an X, it might just be a line. But they all pair up and they all match, and the vast majority of them are X's, right? And it's just the shape of the chromosome itself. And then with the Y, it's like a Y. It's shaped like a Y. That's why we call it a Y. And the bottom is long, so it's reminiscent of it's the same length as the X, right? It matches the length of the X's handles, tails, but the Y is already started to fade away. So it used to be half of an X, and it's instead of being this long half of an X, it's roughly like half, even less maybe than what it used to be. So that upper portion has already started disappearing. And that lower portion, it already lost half. So this is how it's fading away. And this is why they know it's fading away, because they're watching that it actually started out as an X. They can see that it's actually starting to fade, especially as they're testing ancient DNA and they're looking at ancient humans or Homo sapiens, right? Because they can see what the Y looks like in ancient Homo sapiens compared to the Y looking like us now. And they can see that it's started to fade, not started, that it is significantly faded. This is a conversation on Neanderthal. And currently, we're discussing what DNA from Neanderthal and ancient DNA shows us. The next thing we're going to be talking about is language and hearing within Neanderthal. And we got a couple of interesting facts within there. This is the last of a four live section on this subject. And starting Friday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, I'm going to be going into Neanderthal for art and jewelry, accoutrements. And the person behind me is a Tom Borkland art. You can find Tom Borkland on Insta and on Twitter and a couple other places. My website's down right now, and I don't have him on the link tree, I don't think. So, but you can find him a lot of places, and he does beautiful art of Paleolithic beings. And does Neanderthal, he does early Homo sapiens. His Venus of Willendorf is beautiful. She looks like she's from South Africa. She's gorgeous, gorgeous, dark, and she is shell knit hair. Like it's all word escapes. Can't remember the name of those shells, but it's all her hair is all braided into shells. And it's one of the ideas of what the goddess of Willendorf, the Venus of Willendorf hair represents. It's either that or braids, they think. And we know that it's not until, this is, the Venus of Willendorf is 30,000 years ago. We know that light skin, as in Nordic light, is really only 2,000 years old, and that we're really not seeing the vast majority of even Europe being lighter skinned until about 5,000 years ago. So the Venus of Willendorf would have absolutely been part of a culture that was rather dark. Can't explain giants. They're just unexplainable until we get more evidence. I do believe. I do believe. And I have reasons that I believe that are all based on scientific thought process. Turn on the comments, they said. Yes, that's absolutely true, Raven. This is why we keep the comments off. Turtle Island is Earth. Absolutely. Um, But Turtle Island is also specific to North America by certain indigenous groups along the eastern coast of North America. It's actually an English translation of the verbiage that they use for the land that looks like a turtle from above, that in their creation stories they helped create, and it's their responsibility to tend. So, Homo erectus is the first to use fire. Fire before this would have come from lightning, most likely. Um, though there are other things that could have happened that could have sparked fire, earthquakes and volcanoes can spark fire too. There's also like, flint striking certain stones, like just accidentally or like in a landslide could start a fire. There's, brush fires, things like that. All of these happen before humans have fire. But Homo erectus, as a human, actually is our first understander of fire, controller of fire, person who can utilize fire. And it's actually their utilization of fire that gives them the ability to cook their food, which gives them a higher caloric intake during development of brain, which gives us the brains that they gave us. Because as Homo sapiens, just like Homo neanderthalis, the large brains that we have comes directly from Homo erectus understanding and controlling fire and cooking their food. And therefore, their neonates, infants in utero, and their children during brain develop had greater calories to go to their brain because during brain development, your brain will take all the calorie it can. I'm so sorry, Harris. Yeah, it's being really buggy tonight. Though I have problems with internet things usually, and I've been having buggy shit with websites all day, so it could be me. The comments are definitely here now. Trying to get back. I lost it. Okay, there it is. No longer here. That's my twin. Did they have melanin? So yes, absolutely. When people talk about lighter skin with the Neanderthals, um, roughly the lightest you're going to get is probably my tone. And you can't really tell, but I'm more gold than I am white. I'm very, very mixed, like everywhere, all of it. Turtle Island Indigenous, Asian, Black, all of it. And you can really see it in my skin. But I am roughly the lighter, think Mediterranean, right? Is roughly the light that you're getting in Neanderthals. Probably rarely you'll get like a uber light with freckles, just depending. Skin tone will vary for everybody in every space, in every culture. Recessive genetics will pop up. The genetic for light skin is 900,000 years old in Homo erectus. It's where it comes from. And um, it's an adaptation for specific environments. The species advantage is dark skin. It is the skin color that works everywhere. But certain environments you can adapt to and you can get light skin, which is not a species advantage because it doesn't work everywhere. It will kill you some places. So you will see that the recessive genetic for light skin means that occasionally people are going to pop up light even in very dark spaces, just like occasionally children will pop up dark even in very light spaces. Sandra Lang from South Africa is a very famous case of a Black child born to two very white European parents who did not have South African ancestry. Um, and I personally had a friend who had that and DNA tested and everything else. And her husband were absolutely the child's father. And they neither one of them had African ancestry. And their daughter was dark, dark, dark. Like he literally accused her of cheating and she had 4C hair. Like she was dark of skin and 4C hair. So I have seen it personally in real life. Um, but it will happen both ways, and it has. Um, what it is this is a recessive gene. If two people have it, it pops forward. So you can be in South Africa and have light skin from very dark family. You can be in Europe and have dark skin from very light family. Same with hair, same with everything, just everything except probably the infanatic fold, which is pretty specific to Arctic regions, and you had to get there and adapt there to get it. So you're probably not getting it anywhere else, right? Um, so, with that, yes, Neanderthals are going to be lighter of skin, but Neanderthals are also going to be darker of skin. You're going to see that some Neanderthals are even, dark, dark, what we would today call black, usually as in sub Saharan, right? Um, but you're also going to see that some of them are very light. And it's just going to be a range, just like everything else. Yeah, that happens a lot, Letterman. Well, and I mean, I got asked the other day what I did to my lips to make my lips look like this. And I'm like, dude, this been my lips my entire life. Kind of wish my kids had gotten my lips, right? Like I like my lips. They're one of my favorite things about myself. I know where I got these lips from, right? Like, but you can absolutely, but yeah. And you can see that things that we like to think of as typical features for different environments aren't really typical features. Genetics exist, family lines exist. If everybody in your family has a beak of a nose, you're probably going to get a beak of a nose. But occasionally, because somebody wed a girl with a pretty tiny little nose, right? Occasionally, you're going to get a pretty tiny little nose, right? Not that tiny little noses are pretty, but you know what I mean? Like that delicate, fancy thing, right? So, genetics exist. Race doesn't. Race does not exist, but genetics do. So, you will see that. But they did have melanin, and they did have lighter skin. And we had lighter skin sometimes at the time. Again, if we're having light skin though, and it's popping out at that time for Homo sapiens, the likelihood is most Homo sapiens who are popping out with light skin are not passing on their genetics because they're not making it to adulthood, right? Sub-Sahara Africa, without the ability to cover yourself up with well, I mean, you have clothing, but you're not getting a whole lot of shade, and there's no sunscreen, and you got to be out to do the work, right? You're not really going to It's not going to be really easy. You're going to be loved and valued, so you probably will be taken care of, and you might spend a lot of time with grandma in the cave, right? To kind of keep you out of the sun, right? No SPF 50, right? Well, and even as we're talking, because we were talking earlier, that there's like this development of a layer of oil and skin flake that early Homo sapiens and Neanderthals and Denisovians had on their skin, and there was an enzyme in it that kind of made it this almost an SPF 50, right? So they did kind of have something like that, but you still got to get to that development phase. So actually, that said, it is possible, that if you do have that SPF 50, maybe they actually had an ability. I'm not positive. To my knowledge, not really, right? But that doesn't mean that that can change tomorrow. So, Cro-Magnon is an outdated term for early Homo sapien. It's just us. And yes, Neanderthals and us bred, absolutely. Finding giants did not destroy the theory of evolution. If there are giants, because this has been said by you about 5 times in my chat. So, do I believe giants exist? Absolutely. There's evidence that there is a species here in Turtle Island at 130,000 years ago that is a Homo species. Most likely, this is a species that Homo erectus speciated into here on Turtle Island. Where Homo erectus speciates in islands, uh, something happens called island giganticism and island dwarfism. This is how we get Homo florensis. When all species speciate in a small island with a lack of food and not a whole lot of giant predators, they'll shrink. This is why there's pygmy elephants on the island of Flores as well, or there were. Here in Turtle Island, we have the vast majority of megafauna in the globe. This is a huge space with a lot, a lot of food, a lot of space, and a lot of giant predators. So, if Homo erectus made it here and speciated here, which is what the 130,000-year-old Cerruti mastodon find tells us happened, or would most likely be, then it is likely to me that they did speciate into the giants. Giants are something that is talked about globally. There are finds globally, but the vast majority of giant finds have been here in Turtle Island in mounds. If you don't know, there are mounds all over Turtle Island, all over Turtle Island. There is so much architecture here that nobody fucking talks about. Mounds all over Turtle Island. So, the vast majority of giants were found in mounds by early archaeologists. And unfortunately, early archaeologists were racist. Oh, God. Unfortunately, early archaeologists were grave robbers. That's the word I was looking for, racist grave robbers. And because of this, we have documentation, George Washington writing in his journals, watching an indigenous group bury a woman in a mound and waiting until they had left and going out and digging up this fresh burial and stealing everything, including the body. Okay. So this is what early archaeology did. And because it did this and it hid it in its basements and its attics and it displayed it to everybody until somebody's grandmother decided she didn't want a skull in the living room, we've lost a lot. BJ581 is the grave that I work on, and we don't know where her skull is. We found it with her. It's documented. It's even labeled in indelible Indian ink. So it has BJ581 on it, but we have not found it since about 15 years after it was discovered. We still cannot find the skull from the first Neanderthal. the first find of Homo neanderthalis. We still cannot find that skull because it's been lost. Grave robbing. So the giants here in Turtle Island, we don't have a lot of them. Like, I do believe that there's maybe some in the Smithsonian. There might be a couple places in a museum that it's hid in someone's back basement that they probably don't even know they have. Um, and it would take finding them to do any testing or to actually look at the bones and say, yep, this isn't a hoax, because everybody wants to say it's a hoax. Even though giants are 7 to 9 foot tall beings and giganticism exists in our species today, and 9 feet tall is the upper limit of giganticism, right? But everybody wants to say this. Homo sapiens, when they get to Turtle Island at least 33,000 years ago, have a what we call a ghost species again within them. Species we haven't seen in the DNA or in their record, but we see in the DNA. And this is in Turtle Islanders pre-contact. And so this tells us that the species that Homo erectus speciated here in Turtle Island that creates the Cerruti mastodon find is very likely a species that breeds with Turtle Islanders, and that would be the ghost species within Turtle Islanders. This gives weight to a lot of indigenous histories. This gives weight to, well, first of all, let me state that nobody needed the weight, but Western science sure seems to think it does. And to uphold and honor people's own personal stories, Western science seems to think that it needs weight of proof that it can quantify instead of understanding that it doesn't need to tell other people how to quantify. That said, this gives Western scientific proof to Turtle Island indigenous stories that say that Turtle Island indigenous people speciated here, because that is one of the origin stories here in Turtle Island. And it also gives truth to the stories of pretty much every Turtle Island indigenous group of there being giants here. So that is the giants. They did not destroy the theory of evolution. It's not aliens or something like that. It is just another species of Homo erectus following the natural evolution that Turtle Island would have given it and gone into a gigantic phase like all of the other megafauna here on Turtle Island, and then becoming a part of the Homo sapiens that came over here. What does one do to get into archaeology? Usually you have to have a degree. But I didn't get my degree to get into archaeology, and I don't work in the archaeological field. The archaeological field here in Turtle Island is kind of problematic for me. And that's not why I got into archaeology. I got into archaeology I got a degree because I have something to say to the government, to the scientific community, and to the powers that be. And when you have a degree, and you have the letters behind your name in Western society, it gives more weight to what you say. And so to tell archaeology and anthropology and the racist structure, where to shove it, a degree helps. So I didn't get it to work in archaeology, especially not within Turtle Island. But you can get into archaeology by going to school. You can also get into archaeology by going to field schools and helping work within CRM, cultural resource management. There's a few different ways if you want to. This species is not around today except within us. And Homo neanderthal is in everyone on the planet except for the Oyo people of West Africa and the Khoisan people of South Africa, which have 3 ghost species within those 2 groups of people. Comments are definitely here now. I would mate with one if we had to. I'm going to take this comment to take the time to state that we love things that aren't us. To get to the point of Neanderthal DNA that we have as a species, we had to breed with Neanderthals for 100,000 years. And we did. We lived side by side in 2 caves, a 5-minute walk from each other in the Levant. Great advancements in our species. And this is where most of our DNA is changing and mixing, right? We have 7 other species that we currently know of within us. Currently, we know of 13 species total. Of those 7 species, we probably didn't come into contact with a few of them. Um, a couple of them that we could have come in contact with, like Naladi, which is very possible we can't get DNA from, so we don't know for certain if they're the ghost species that we see, right? So everything we see, we fuck. We don't start fighting it until 10,000 years ago. And this starts with othering. This starts with stratification of society and somebody's need to maintain superiority over you. And it continues first with the barbarians in the hills, and then to that other city state, and then to women with the ancient Greeks, when we see the start of othering within women or within culture. Women is the first that we see with the othering within a singular culture. After women, we see it go to religion. After religion, we see it go to race. It starts becoming race when Europeans land in 1492 in Turtle Island. We see before this that Black people were just people before this. Africa was just Africa before this. Kings of Africa married queens of England, or not England, but of Europe, and vice versa. There is no look at the skin color of somebody from Africa as being problematic. They're Islamic, and Europe is Christian. So there is othering based on religion, but there are plenty of people who are African who are living in Europe at the time, and they're not treated shittily. Science being outlawed as well by the Christian church because science exists pre 400. Science and medicine being outlawed by the Christian church. Many Europeans would actually go to Africa or to Arabia to study medicine and study science because it was not outlawed there like it was in Europe. So race as an othering does not start until Turtle Island is occupied. And then it starts because Turtle Island is so advanced, so advanced, so ecologically advanced, so medicinally advanced, and so scientifically advanced, and living in such concert with nature that their vast cities are not diseased like European cities are, that Europe goes, oh, maybe that's not a sin. Because they also look at Turtle Island Indigenous people and literally see the children of God, and that is how they describe them, as being as close to God as you can get, as being as idyllic and godlike as you can get. And then they kill them because that's what they do. Before 10,000 years ago, if we saw something we did not know, we did not fight it, we did not kill it, we were not othering, that doesn't happen until 10,000 years ago. And again, it is somebody's need to maintain control over you. Every time you other somebody else and say it's somebody else and not the fucking government, you're keeping them in power and you're keeping yourself in hell. That's it. That's all. Okay. We fuck it. We don't fight it. Lucy was real. Absolutely. She's 3.5 million years old. 3 million years old. 3 million, 3.2. 3.2 million years old. But she's absolutely real and beautiful. And Homo naladi's upper body is Lucy, except their brain, which is modern day Homo sapien, when nothing else had that brain. Anyways. No, Lynette, I am discussing DNA and Neanderthal currently. Which Neanderthal characteristics are portrayed in the species or in the picture behind me, correct? So Neanderthal and the facial structure is a lot different than us. And so I'm going to go over that really quick, actually. So with us, when we think of Neanderthals' bigger nose, we think that they're like us and they just have a big nose like some of us do. Behind our nose, all of this, nothing. There's this two narrow slits right here. They're very long and they're very thin. And if you feel along here, you can find yours, right? And you can see where they are when you press in here, right? Because now you're covering, right? It's kind of up a little bit. But once you press in here and you can actually feel the bump back here, right? So the size of that is longer and narrower. Whereas in Neanderthals, this goes like this. Okay. And so it creates a broad nose over, but it also creates a wide nose of space that air is going into. Now, the other thing with Neanderthals and their facial structure that combines with this is their mid face prognosis, which you can see within her. And that is that the middle of their face sticks out like this really far. Now, with that nose and that extra capacity for sinuses, you're able to take the air in and go through the sinus cavity and warm the air before it gets to the brain. The other thing that we see on her that are specific Neanderthal characteristics are she has this heavy M-shaped brow ridge, and you can see how it sticks out quite far. Hers isn't quite as shelved as they typically are. Okay. She might have a little bit of Homo sapien in her because it's not quite as shelved as it typically is. And you also see that she has no mental eminence. Again, this bump on the bottom of her chin. You can see how her chin just completely recedes. It just completely disappears. And we see people with receding chins these days, but even people with receding chins these days have a small little mental eminence on the bottom of their chin. Oh, thank you. Dan, you're so good at making people remember that. Please make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube so that we can actually up the YouTube content as well. Ah. Hi, you have met Native Americans who are angry at the suggestion that Black folk were here first. Can I clarify? Yes. So, what they're angry at is there is a group of people who are stating that the people that Christopher Columbus found when he landed were African American. They were directly from Africa 200 years prior, and that the resulting people that we currently call Turtle Island Indigenous people are just a mix of Black and white. Pretty much most of those statements logically just don't make sense, anyways, but no evidence supports those statements. They like to use the Olmec heads, and the Olmec heads look like Turtle Island Indigenous people of that area, right? This is what becomes the Maya and the Aztec later, or the Maya later. And if you look at people in that space at that time and today, you see that the features are the same features of the Olmec heads. They say that Mansu Musa is the African king who brought Africans to Turtle Island, and that is how all of Turtle Island was populated with people. And he's supposed to have come in 1390s, so 100 years prior. And he was an African king who is known as Midas. This is our literal Midas. Mansa Musa, amazing king. You really should look into him. Um, and he was Muslim, and the Muslims writ everything down. Like they writ their shit. Everything they said, they wrote down, everything they did. And his entire reign is extensively documented. He made it to Mecca. He traveled all around Africa. He had great peace throughout his lands. All of this is extensively documented. He did not go to Turtle Island. Um, the DNA also doesn't support this. The DNA shows that Turtle Islanders got Homo denisovian DNA before they make it here. To get the Homo denisovian DNA amount that they have at 0.02 to 0.03%, it shows that they bred with Homo denisovians for 10,000 years. Homo denisovians are in Asia. So we know that the last mitochondrial Eve to come out of Africa, the descendant of all Homo sapien, or the ancestor of all Homo sapiens outside of Africa, comes out 50,000 years ago from the Levant area. Um, or the last mitochondrial line, last group, I guess. Maybe it's family is a better way to put it. So we know with that, uh, say 10,000 years in Asia, and Turtle Island indigenous people we know now are here at least 33,000 years ago for Homo sapien. Um, so, maybe there's an extra 10,000 years over here, maybe there's an extra 10,000 years in Asia, but all of it is out of Africa. Um, the other problem with this thought process and theory is it erases the Middle Passage. It says that the Middle Passage didn't happen. It erases the transatlantic slave trade and says that it didn't happen. That the Black people that we see here in the United States now were the Black people that were here in the United States when Europeans arrived. And that this is, oh, sorry, I don't know what that is. So that's the problem with that. And that's why people are getting upset, because it's erasing Indigenous history and it's erasing Black history. Um, and all evidence shows differently. And for me, and this is the hugest point in the whole fucking thing, for me, what this does is it gives Europeans a pass. It says that Europeans didn't commit half the atrocities that they did. It says that the transatlantic slave trade didn't happen. It says that the genocides didn't happen. And to do that is pretty horrific. Accountability is the bare minimum that Europeans need to take for these actions, especially when so many things are still happening that are a direct result of them or directly genocidal for them, right? Europeans taking accountability for that is the bare fucking minimum. If you can take accountability for your wins, can't you take accountability for your losses? Like, you cannot take accountability for the revolution if you won't take accountability for the transatlantic slave trade, right? You have to take accountability for both the fucking things. You can't just pick and choose, right? So accountability is the bare minimum on that for me. And I think for many people. And so it really raises that accountability factor and gives an excuse. And really, do Europeans need another fucking excuse? Oh, I think I already answered that one. Okay. If evolution is real, why don't humans secrete poison or grow gills? Why would we? What factors would have made us need to do either of those things? That's what I would say. And evolution is way more real than your God. Whether your creation story is aliens or a deity, evolution has more weight to me. That does not mean that I fault creation stories or have a problem with creation stories. Creation stories have a positivity, and creation stories tell us a lot. And creation stories should be heard and listened to. It does mean that deciding that your creation story gives you the right to destroy other people is problematic. And it does say that your creation story superseding everybody else's creation story is problematic. Come on, collarbone, she's snatched. Okay, I think that's all of them. So I think that males are still going to be there. What we look at and see as male is still going to be there. It's just that the chromosome is going to shift into something else, which has happened in other species, and they still retained penises. Almost, yes, I do post recordings, and all of them are currently on TikTok or on YouTube anyways, because I'm streaming on YouTube as this is being streamed. So it's any Widda Ord on YouTube without the periods. Yes, new subscribe. Oh my gosh. Oh, okay. I saw something and I went, wait a minute, did we reset something? Okay. Oh, thank you, Reba. Okay. Turtle Island is one of the words, phrases used by several nations on the eastern seaboard of North America to describe North America. It is a part of their creation stories, um, and it's the translation into English. Uh, Many people have adapted it in North America. Abayaya, and I probably am pronouncing it wrong. I'm going to have to do it a few times before I'm going to get to it, is the name for South America. There are also a few other names in North America and South America. Turtle Island is just one that's being adapted to kind of be universal among many indigenous groups. And Widda Ord, what does it mean? N means a, and Ord means word. These are Swedish words. Swedish is one of the languages that I speak, and I kind of go a Viking most of the time. Like I stand shield walls a lot. I've been in a lot of front lines, stood a few shield walls, and so Sweden Sweden is one of those connections that I have, like ancestrally, and something I do a lot of study on. And so, and it's the grave that I study is in Sweden, and so Swedish is one of the languages that I use for reconnection. Widda is the oldest etymology of the word witch, and wid means knowledge, and da means feminine. The Widda and the Druids are the scholarly caste class level of Celtic society. They are your healers, they're your doctors, they are your lawgivers or law keepers, they are your teachers, they are your keepers of history, and they are your scientists, and they are also sometimes your priests. But they are more about being the scholars and the educated class of a society than they are about being a worship class, right? And so I use Widda as scientist, healer, teacher. Those are three things that I have always been very big on. Those have always been focuses of my life. And so Widda to me, or how I use it, is as a title. Um, though it is also a call sign, or like, my street name, like what I'm referred to. But nom de plume, whatever it is. So basically, it says a widow's word. So a teacher's word, a scientist's word, and that's what Enwida Ord is. I don't believe in an omnipotent being. The question is, do I believe in a creator? Um, I I don't. I believe in the earth as a creator. Like I believe in the earth as the mother. I believe in the earth as creating us, just like she kind of creates all the species, right? Um, but I do not think of her as an omnipotent, intentional creator. Though, I mean, I think that there's some intent in creating us for the biome, right? Because she creates us to tend the biome, to be a part of that honorable harvest. But she is not. I don't think she molded us, shaped us in that sense, right? And I definitely don't think she's omnipotent. Are omniscient. Like I don't believe she sees all. And well, okay, so I do believe that we're all interconnected energy wise. So I believe that I feel what you feel pain wise. So to that level, yes, but at the same point, like I don't believe like she can snap her fingers and make something happen. Um, I do have time to talk about the Y chromosome a little bit again. Mocha Macau, Mocau. If you want me, if I need to pronounce that differently, please let me know. What is your question about the Y-DNA? Africans enslaved other Africans, and Africans enslaved white people from Europe when the Iberian Peninsula, right? Um, and Africans enslaved people further back of all races, right? Race doesn't exist, but Africans being a part of Europe the entire fucking time. And, all that back and forth and that travel and that merchant and that, you know, it's always been interconnected. Everybody wants to think it's not been interconnected. It's always been interconnected. We've always been so interconnected. The Bell Beaker people are three absolutely separate genetic cultures with the same fucking culture, right? So you have the Bell Beaker people in Upper France, you have the Bell Beaker people on the Iberian Peninsula, and then you have the Bell Beaker people. Sorry, not France, Siberia, up near northern Eurasia, not quite Siberia. Iberian Peninsula, and then either in France or over in England, I can't remember, Britain. Three totally genetically different cultures, all sharing the same culture, all sharing the same pottery, all sharing all the same things. So we've always been very global. Um, and people in Africa have absolutely been enslaving as long as everybody else has been enslaving. Legendarily, the Egyptians enslaved the Hebrews, right? So people in Africa have absolutely been enslaving other cultures as long as we've been enslaving, and slavery is a global thing. There's a huge difference between pre-chattel slavery, which is basically indentured servitude, and chattel slavery. What we have in the United States is post-chattel slavery returns to indentured servitude. The 13th Amendment is still slavery. It's just slavery because you broke the law, right? So everybody enslaved everybody. It's just a different slavery, which is imperative to understand when you understand that when Africans are selling other Africans to Europeans, they're selling them for their term of slavery. So indentured servitude and pre-chattel slavery, you end up getting caught in a war or in a raid or something like that. And for a period of time, you are a slave. You have not lost your rights as a human. You're still human. You're not a cattle, right? You're still human. Um, and you have the right to freedom. You have the right to earn your freedom. You have the right to create your freedom. You have the right to your own money still. You have the right to your own making still. You do not, you're not a you're not devalued to the point of chattel. Okay. So this is pre-chattel slavery. So you have the ability to earn your way free. So if I'm selling you somebody that I just captured, thinking that they're going to earn their way free, and you take them and 7 generations later, they're still enslaved, it's a whole different fucking ball game. Children were not enslaved. Children were not born into slavery. They might be enslaved as children, but usually they were adopted rather than enslaved if they're taken in a raid. You do not see, because if you adopt them rather than enslave them, then they're going to be warriors for you later on. If you enslave them, it's less likely that they're going to be warriors for you later on as children, right? So you're not seeing children born into slavery. A child born in pre-chattel slavery to a slave is born free. They do not serve that term of slavery. Same thing with indentured servitude. Um, so thinking that, family is going to come home, that other tribes people are going to come home. That's the difference. That's the hardship of it, right? Do I believe in collective consciousness? Every bit of me, every bit of me. I think that we're all just a giant ball of energy. Religious othering thousands plus years before race. Yes. So you're going to see that the barbarians in the hill is the first othering, and that starts around 10,000 years ago with our first city, Angazal. It's in all of our early written documents that the barbarians in the hill, and we see early evidence of fighting because of barbarians in the hill, right? Attacking grain storage. So that's our first othering. This goes until probably 5,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago, when vast majorities of everybody is in cities. Like by this point, most peoples are forming into cities or villages. At this point, you're seeing a lot of nations, a lot of city states with villages outlying, and a lot of nations. You're developing an idea of nationhood, right? Of people as a nationhood. And so, no, not 5,000. Let me think for just a second. Maybe 6,000 years ago, because you really see that started nationhood starting really with Egypt. And you start to see it in the Middle East at the same time, in the Levant area at the same time, shortly after Egypt. Egypt is our first. It's also our first writing. Hieroglyphs are our first writing. So, well, except for maybe Neanderthals, which we haven't gotten, but we will get into tonight. So with that, we're seeing that othering by city state probably lasts until about 3,000 years ago. You still see a lot of othering by city states, but in certain city states, the othering becomes othering by gender. Okay. So you see it start within Greece, who are still nation states, city states who are othering other nations, but then they start othering within their community. There are people of every race, color, creed, all of it, right? Um, but they are othering the women based on gender. And it's because they were pedophiles. It's because they were pedophiles and they wanted excuses. And so the Romans, when they appropriate this, they appropriate it as toxic patriarchy. They appropriate all Greek culture and it becomes the toxic patriarchy within Roman culture. And so they are othering women. Again, at this point, we are not othering based on skin color. You see that there are plenty of African people. There's an African emperor, right? So you see that there are plenty of people of high rank that are dark of skin, plenty of people of high rank who are, Asian. It doesn't really matter at this point. And then at 400, when you see Constantine trying to become a singular ruler out of a triumvirate, is when you see othering based on religion start. And again, this is about control. This is about Constantine maintaining control. And he actually uses science and medicine within this and outlaw science and medicine in the church's name, right? So the church outlaws science and medicine, outlaw the entire portion of Eurasia that is under the control of Rome at this time, which is from Byzantium up into right like Latvia, like right under Scandinavia, over into well, they've just walked out of England, right? They've just walked out of Britain. So you see that it starts with that control there. After it's, and then the next step into race is 1492. So timeline wise, hills, 6,000 years, 10 to 4,000 years ago. 10,000 years ago to 4,000 years, no, sorry, to 6,000 years ago. So 4,000 years. 10,000 years ago to 6,000 years ago. From 6,000 years ago to roughly 3,000 years ago, you see othering based on nation states. That continues, but you add gender. And then from 400 to 1,200, it's religion, which it's still religion. And then at, not 1,200, sorry, that's 1,200 years. 400 to 1492, 1,500. You see it based on religion, and then it becomes race, though it's still at the time religion. These things, like once an othering starts, like we're still othering the barbarians in the hills today, right? We're still othering other nation states. It's not that we stop othering based on that. We just add another othering. We just add another reason to hate, basically. We are absolute lovers, not fighters. Okay, so let's go ahead. Maybe they have less sinus infections. That might be real. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the last part of this tonight. I'm going to kind of skip over some of the comments by uh, okay, so I'm going to get distracted completely on all of the things that you're asking. One of these days we'll do a live that's just open for questions. We did a couple of those early on. They didn't really take off, but now it's a lot heavier, so it might. Let me get into the next section. The next section that I want to talk about is whether or not we see speech in Neanderthals. And the answer is yes, we absolutely see speech in Neanderthals. The find of the hyoid bone in like 2016, 2015 was a really significant find because up until this point, we didn't think Neanderthals talked. Now, mind you, we've known about Neanderthals since 1870. We found the first one in 1850, but we thought it was just another Homo sapien because we didn't believe in evolution at the time. So we see that the hyoid bone find gave us our first indication that absolutely Neanderthals could talk. And so with that, we started looking closer. We also see within the base of the skull the patterning of the imprint of the brain that they were able to talk because here, this portion of your brain here, and the way it imprints on your skull shows whether or not you have the patterns in your brain or the pathways in your brain for complex language. In this, I always want to point out and double down everything has language. The tree has a language. The tree speaks to other trees. It has a matriarchal clan and it lives in a nation. Forests are nations. Your cat has a language. The dog has a language. Some of these languages are way more in depth and capable of communicating meaning than our language is, or our languages than verbal language. Um, so we absolutely see that everything has language, and we need to make sure that we understand that. But the syllabic verbal language that we have was shared by Neanderthals. Not only do we see it in the brain patterning and in the hyoid bone, we also see that in their chest structure, the rib cage and the lungs, they have the ability to speak. Because when you are talking for a long period of time and communicating over and over again, the ability to breathe while talking. So I'm expelling air as I talk, right? Every time I talk, I expel air. So I can talk for an extended period of time. And while I'm talking for an extended period of time, I don't have to take an in breath. The ability to do that comes from the capacity of my lungs and from the way that my rib cage forms and the way that my rib cage will push the air up, right? And it pushes the air through the voice box. And the way that it's pushing the air through the voice box gives me the ability to form the syllables. All of these things are because of the lung capacity and because of the rib cage. So we can see that the Broca's area. Okay. I'll have to look at that. I don't know that specific name, but yeah. Um, we can see with that they have the ability to have verbal language. These are three different ways that we see verbal language. The last thing that we see is that their inner meatus, that little tiny bone, which is what we're using to get DNA out of ancient humans now, right? That little tiny bone is amazing for DNA, but that inner ear bone, the shape of it tells us that they have the ability to hear on the vibrations that human speech is. So, the ability to hear on the vibrations that human speech has gives them the ability to absolutely converse with us. The same type of spoken language, right? And the same type of understanding of spoken language that we have. Um, the last really cool and curious thing about this is a very recent find, like the last year and a half. Um, they have found a bone that has marks on it that are deliberately made and seem to be in a accounting way. Like it's a couple of specific marks, and the way that they're written, it seems to be marking something down, right? Um, and so they think that this might be a very early form of written language, and that it's possible that the Neanderthals at least had the way to, or understanding of a way to document things. Um, and so this is really cool and new and important. And it really tells us a lot more about our currently developing understanding of Neanderthal lifeways, right? Not only are we looking at a complex speech pattern, but we're also looking at the possibility of writing. There's so much more that shows us that Neanderthals really are just as human as we are, right? Some information states that their neurons may have fired slower, right? The idea that they had four life stages instead of five shows that their brains might have had less malleability, but they were very intelligent beings with language, with art, with burial, right? All of these things show an extremely complex group of people. And it's really important to me that people understand in the 70s, we didn't have the concept that one day we'd all be talking on the internet, right? But we didn't miss it in the 70s. There was some forward thinkers that thought, "Oh, wow, that would be cool." The Jetsons, right? There was some forward thought, but we didn't miss it in our homes, right? We didn't feel the loss of it. If you have never seen a car, you don't feel the loss of a car. Neanderthals, in their extremely comfortable, decorated caves, living extremely comfortable hunter gatherer lives, which is 16 hours for your overworkers a week for production for your group of people, um, did not feel any different than you feel in that space, right? They didn't feel any different than you feel in your space today. You do feel the loss every time you put your phone down. They didn't feel any different than you feel with all the comforts of life that you believe that we should have. I'll put it that way, right? They had all the comforts of life that they thought that they should have, right? Um, so, and that's not to say that if they weren't popped in, they wouldn't go, well, shit, I wish, but, they didn't feel that loss. They didn't feel any different than you feel today, with the exception of the societal training that you've been given, right? So they don't feel or, it's not it's home to them. It's still home to them, just like it's home to you. And that's something that is extremely important to me as we move through this. So I wanted to make sure and impart that. I'm going to go ahead and turn on all comments again so that anybody who's looking to answer questions can or ask questions can. Um, and then I'll probably go in about 15, 20 minutes. I don't really stay up past 10 these days because I've been getting up at like 6 o'clock in the morning. So I probably won't be on much longer. I crave that, absolutely. So, like, eventually I'll end up in the middle of the woods again, though it will absolutely be with electricity, running water, and internet. I will be completely detached from everything else, but I will be able to step inside and, have my internet. More about the Y chromosome. So the Y chromosome, so which part? Let me know which part you're asking about the Y chromosome or what you're asking in specific. Could Neanderthals hear things different than us? No, they have the same auditory system, or not same auditory system, same auditory capabilities that we did. So they hear on the same level that we did. Turtle Island indigenous people do have some less Neanderthal in them. But so do Africans. I think there's the same percentage in African and Turtle Island indigenous people, but I'm not positive. It might be a little bit more in Turtle Island indigenous people. But I also know that the finding of it in African people pre-colonization is like the study of pre-colonization African finds for that has been relatively new. So I'm not exactly sure what they know with that, all of the depth of it. And I did see the comment. So when they're saying 13% Neanderthal, they're not saying that your son has 13% Neanderthal. What they're saying is that he has more Neanderthal DNA than 13% of the population. He probably has about 1 or 2% Neanderthal. Neanderthal were very short, so the 6'5" definitely would not come from any Neanderthal genes. I I think there's a different species of human on the planet today. There's a doctorate of anthropology currently studying whether or not Homo florensis is still alive on Flores. So possibly. I don't know yet, though. When did they decide to start farming um, Angazal, our earliest agricultural cities? Though we do see farming before that in a couple other spaces, though farming like Western farming, Western agriculture starts in Egypt where it works. And then is taken and put to Angazal at 10,000 years ago in Jordan, where it does not work. And it does not work anywhere but Egypt, Western agriculture. The next topic for live is going to be Friday morning at 8 a.m. We will be talking about jewelry and art within Neanderthals. definitely an Asian American, Native American ancestor of the person behind me on the screen. You are com they might be an ancestor of Asian Americans and Native Americans and Europeans. This is Neanderthal behind me. It is true the Y chromosome is degenerating. It's already started. It started out as an X chromosome, and then it lost one of its legs and half of two other of its legs and became a Y chromosome. And the half of the other two legs are starting to, they've already faded significantly and they're fading away. And so currently, it's probably a million years, I think is what they're saying, but we are losing the Y DNA or the Y chromosome. It does not mean we will not have males anymore. We will still have males. They will just use another chromosome. So when it tells you you have more DNA than a certain percentage of other people, it doesn't mean jack shit. Sorry. It's just one of Ancestry and 23andMe's little catchiest, right? Um, I would look at what percentage it says you have. It'll tell you 2%, 1%. Nobody has over like 5%, I think is the highest percentage of Neanderthal DNA, and that's in in Asia. So nobody has over 5%. Um, Most people have about 1% Neanderthal DNA. You can my website's down right now, but the link tree in my bio, if you scroll all the way to the down on the bottom, there's DNA sites and you can upload it to one of those like the GD site or the Your True Ancestry site or the Your DNA profile site, and it'll give you a breakdown of actual percentage of DNA. Thank you. It's my gray streak. The jab does not give you a triple helix. That's just so blatantly idiocracy. That is so blatantly idiocracy. I just don't even like there's no way. Um okay, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to give it just a couple more seconds and then I'm going to go ahead and turn off the comments again. Um I'll be back in 2 shakes. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn back to subscriber only so I can read through the comments and the questions and answer them. I turn the comments off and on because I've been asked to. I've been doing this since August. August. And from day one, we've gotten a lot of hate in this. We've had a lot of problems. Um, it seems that the alt right or the anti science or the ultra Christian or usually really white people have a problem with truth. All of my stuff has accredited scientific resources that back it up, and I have a link tree in my bio that gives you links to all of those sources. I am a scientist. I have degrees. It's not sus for me to not let you be a troll. It's actually called a boundary. You might not understand boundaries. Most people in our society don't. I know it took me a couple decades to understand boundaries. Nobody taught them to me. But boundaries are you don't get to treat me like that, and I'm going to place something so that you can't treat me like that because obviously you're crossing boundaries. Um, TikTok gave this to me. It's my space. Free speech is not without consequence. It just means you have the right to say whatever the fuck you want. If I want to punch you, I can. That's what free speech means. And this is my space. It's not a free speech zone. It is a Sarah is imparting information to you zone. It is not a you get to come in and jack off. So I turn the comments off. so I don't have to listen to your stupid, inane lack of desire to learn anything. Not sus. I currently turn them on to sub only so I can read back through and answer questions. If I have 300 people, 477 people asking me questions, I can't see the question long enough to read it, let alone answer it. But if I turn off the comments, I can read back through and then maybe I can answer some of your questions. And again, I did this because I'll get up to 10,000 people in here and it's a bunch of trolls being shitty and nasty. And every single person who watches these on a regular basis, who follows me, who sticks around is like, please turn it off. Please turn it off. It's so bad. I have over 30 mods and I can have half of them going and it is still incapable of keeping up with your refusal to hear truth because it threatens your genitalia. Just saying, you know? Like, why are you so triggered? I'm going to go back. And again, we're talking about Neanderthal. It's not even your species. It is all indoctrination, willful ignorance. We're taught as Western culture to be willfully ignorant. We're taught that willful ignorance is a positive. Don't question God. Don't question the book. Don't question what the government says. We're taught willful ignorance. We're taught to be stupid. And they dumb us down in our schools. And they dumb us down with our food. And they dumb us down in every way, shape, or form. And the funny thing is the right knows this. The right knows this. They just don't want to blame it on the government. They want to blame it on the other side because othering works. They don't have Caucasian features. They're a Neanderthal. Oh, apparently I can only go back so far in the comments right now. TikTok is being very glitchy. So I can't get further back than Biden voter. Don't vote. I don't vote. And I do not encourage you to vote at any specific time. Anytime you'll never hear me. I say revolt. I don't vote. I revolt. I don't get political on this platform because this is not the platform for politics, because this platform with politics will get you banned, but I don't get political. So no, I'm not a Biden voter. He's just another creepy, rapist, old white dude. Just like pretty much every other president we've ever had. The only one I'd say who wasn't racist or white was Obama. And he's a pretty decent person, but he didn't do shit for the natives when he should have. And probably the best president we've ever had, though. But they're all creepy, racist, old white dudes who like to rape young women or girls. So none of them, right? Don't vote, revolt. And as long as you're voting for the lesser of two evil, why you let them scare you into your thoughts? Why you let your thoughts be influenced by fear? Why will you vote for somebody who doesn't do a damn thing you want them to just so somebody else doesn't get into office based on whether or not you think they're the devil? A fictional fucking being. So based on fiction, you're going to vote against somebody and not get anything you want and need. I love the show Bones. I absolutely love the show Bones. Thank you for flowers. Thank you, everybody. Naya, no, I don't do Turtle Island Indigenous stuff. Sorry. This is a Neanderthal behind me. I am Turtle Island Indigenous. I am part Turtle Island Indigenous information for Turtle Island Indigenous people to be able to take what white academics is finally acknowledging to be true, so that they have armor and armory to further the advancement of nationhood and rights. But I don't teach Turtle Island Indigenous stuff. And so I don't really do a lot of focus on Turtle Island Indigenous archaeology and history because, for one thing, Turtle Island Indigenous people, for the most part, do not want their ancestors dug up because it's grandma. It still matters. And archaeology does that without consent, right? And the other thing is that my lane. I stay in it. Turtle Island indigenous, but I'm not a culture keeper. I don't belong to a nation. I have bloodlines. I have family ties. I have, was raised within, but I don't belong anywhere. I stay in my lane, and so I don't treat Turtle Island indigenous stuff. So I probably won't touch on Naya, though I probably will be doing a little bit more content on different things for Turtle Island indigenous people again to use as armory. Um, so that might come up within that, but I'm not even sure Naya at this point because I don't focus on Turtle Island indigenous history. Humans did not always use some form of, well, okay, so agriculture as in husbandry of plant, yes. We have always interacted and existed with the world around us and understood what plants were useful for us through trial and error, experimentation, science, medicine, and what plants we could modify. Turtle Island indigenous people took something that looked like wheat and turned it into corn with indigenous ecology. We have always had ecology, but agriculture, as in um, Western agriculture, monoculture, or removing a plant from its indigenous location and transplanting it to a new location and forcing it to grow in that location, is new. And that's what starts with Angisal. But as in unification with the land, being part of the ecology, being a part of that biome, and husbanding and taking care of and pruning and tending. We've always tended. We haven't always tried to control. I totally missed with the making the. Okay. I saw something that said I asked it before. Be down in there really quick and I'll see what it is that you're asking. I'm trying to get to the top of these, the skeletonette. So I think Naya is one of the children in a cave, but if not, I'll take a look and see if it's something that's predating. Usually it's stuff that I look for that predates current knowledge when I'm looking at Turtle Island indigenous stuff. I'm looking at stuff that changes current knowledge, unless it has like an effect that really changes current Western academic knowledge. I don't usually, or gives total proof to something that was I know is said. So people are saying that Neanderthals lost their Y chromosome and lived for another 3,000 years, 300,000 years. I am saying that, and people are saying that. So what they're saying is that uh, the Neanderthal. So we've had a hard time finding Neanderthal DNA for Y chromosome. Anyways, it's been extremely scanty, because Y DNA is so fragmentary and already dissolving in us and so problematic. They don't find a lot. They found a couple of fragments, and what they have found in the fragments that indicate Y DNA is that it's not a Neanderthal Y. It is in Neanderthals post or after 300,000 years ago, it is a Homo sapien Y. It is a Y that is characteristic of a Homo sapien and not characteristic of a Neanderthal. What they're seeing is at 350,000 years ago, the one Y DNA that they have found in Neanderthal at 350,000 years ago is showing Denisovian Y DNA and not Neanderthal Y DNA. We cannot find a Y DNA that is specific to Neanderthal. Now, the current common thought process is that they lost their Y DNA like we are losing ours and have been losing ours, that they lost their Y DNA and replaced it with a Denisovian Y DNA originally and then sapien Y DNA later, or possibly, so there are other alleles on the SRY gene that can code for male genetics and for all the other genetics currently And if one of those alleles turns into the ability to switch on male versus female, because that's the only thing Y does for us, is switch, then that could replace the Y DNA that we're currently losing. And this could have happened with Neanderthal. And if this happened with Neanderthal, they would have a different DNA that we're not seeing and understanding. And then some of them would have that Y DNA because of that breeding with their outer space. So, say if instead they have two X DNA, but one of their X DNA switches that allele for the male genitalia, so having a penis and testes still, switches that signal, and it's still two X's, but there's the secondary X makes that switch, and it just depends. It's not dependent on the DNA itself, like the code of the DNA, or like the X versus Y, right? So if that happened in Neanderthals, then the people that this would be why we're finding a lot of X in Neanderthals, because all of their males would have had two X's, just like all of their females would have had two X's. The Y started out as two X's. The Y is a disintegrated X. An X looks like an X. So I don't have a picture of pairs of chromosomes. I need a picture of pairs of chromosomes for this thought process. So we have 23 pairs of chromosomes for 46, okay? And the X looks like an X. I'm not sure if you can see that, okay? And the Y used to look like an X. I'm going to do it this way. So, sorry. Hold on. I didn't mean to throw you guys sideways. So they kind of attach like this. This attaches to this, and this attaches to this, and then they kind of attach in the middle. But this is like narrowing. So this is an arm, and this is an arm, and this is an arm, and this is an arm. Okay. So if you take this and you lose this, and half of this, and half of this, you have a Y. And this is our Y DNA. It started out as an X and it lost part of itself and it became a Y. So if we lose it completely and another X steps up, it still has that coding within it. So you might still have two X's. Okay. So we could see that what we think is a multitude of X's might actually be a male Neanderthal, but we're not seeing that X as a male switch. We could see that the same thing happens within us. And again, we're still going to have penises and vaginas. We're still going to have the organs that we have. It is a change in the switch of the chromosome. That's all. Currently, the Y chromosome does nothing but that switch. Everything that it was coded for, that it does kind of do, something else has taken over doing. And then it has a bunch of chromosomes that we don't know what the fuck they're there for. They don't have any use. So it seems that Neanderthals either lost it early on, maybe they never had it, right? Or they replaced it with RY. But if they had Denisovian Y beforehand, so. They do not test comparison of bones from gravesites back from antiquity. They are very inaccurate. I'm not sure what you're thinking they do not test. Oh, I see what you're saying. You're talking about like 23andMe and Ancestry. You're right. They don't compare the test to ancient stuff. They compare the test to modern populations. And that's absolutely correct. And that's why they're not accurate. And that's why you want to go to the other sites in the link tree. Who's in the background? This is one of Tom Borkland's renditions of a Homo Neanderthal. So I don't randomly just look up things. Like, first of all, that's labor. And second of all, um, I'm pretty focused in my area. So just telling me to look up something doesn't work. If you tell me you know somebody that's interesting, that might work. But, um, you know, the picture behind me is Homo neanderthalis. And I would say that it's pretty representative of Homo neanderthalis in Eurasia, and that the vast majority of Neanderthal DNA is in Asian people. Your wife had a soft spot on the top of her skull near the back of her head. So that happens. Many people, so we all have soft spots when we're born, but some people's cranial sutures won't fully close. What am I trying to prove? That we are all kind. We are all, so not kind, that we are all nurturing, biologically nurturing, that we are all biologically, and this means the fundamental of who we are, communal, and that we are all biologically curious, that we do not other, that the idea that we're supposed to hate somebody based on some arbitrary fact is ridiculous and used to maintain control over you. And if you can understand that community is more important and taking care of each other is more important than allowing somebody to hoard enough money to buy a dick-shaped rocket. And if you can start looking in your brother's bowl to make sure he has enough instead of giving a shit whether or not he has more than you, that we might actually stop our own extinction and the deep loneliness and sadness and disconnection that every single one of us feel unless there's something really seriously disconnected about us can be cured. Once we understand that deep depression, the reason that young men are unaliving themselves at such high rates, the reason that the vast majority of us don't want to leave our house, the reason that we wake up tired and sad, the reason that all of this shit is going on inside our head is because society is fucked, because it thinks that we're all evil, and because it has narcissistic teachings. And if we can break away from that, then we can maybe get to a point where we stop feeling like this. And I think I know how. And so I want to tell you that's the point. I'm tired of being depressed, tired of being afraid of you guys. Maybe if I show you and teach you who we really are, then I don't have to live in fear, right? Maybe if I show you and teach you who we really are, then I'm not going to have some big ass dude scream at me in the grocery store or on the street. Maybe my siblings won't be killed, right? Maybe I won't lose another sister, right? Maybe I won't go through decades of PTSD because of the military and because of sexual trauma in the military, right? Like if I can teach you guys that we're better than this, innately loving beings, not innately evil, not innately lustful, not innately hoarders, not innately not locusts, not locusts, not locusts. If I can teach you that, then maybe I will be able to be safe walking down my street. That's the point. And that's what I'm trying to prove. And I have the science that backs it. Trolls have arrived. I started practicing medicine at 2 years old, following along beside my mother and my aunties, learning how to honorably harvest medicines and what medicines worked for what things. Do you know that we don't have an antiviral yet in modern medicine, but that Douglas fir is an antiviral for the lung? Indigenous medicine has all of these things, and indigenous medicine always had all these things, right? Um, I have practiced 3 different fields of medicine across my life. I've done emergency medicine, I've done radiography, and I've done herbology, and I've done, energy. And, uh, I wouldn't call myself a doctor. I am an archaeologist and an anthropologist, and I am a healer, and I am a historian, and I am a storyteller, and I'm a scientist, but I don't call myself a doctor. Okay, so I'm gonna go look this up. I'm actually over time, but I think that there's actually like 3 people asking this. Okay. So I'm not sure what we want to talk about with this. Um, I am going to state that this is 12,000 years old, widely roamed. Um, but we know that we're here earlier than that already. Um, she did a lot of walking, but she didn't do any labor around, like any hunter. She didn't do any gathering labor. There's no upper body muscles. And they think it could be a disease process. Um, so we know that Clovis first is wrong. Clovis happened. Clovis are beautiful people, but Turtle Islanders have been here at least 33,000 years, and that's from a different cave in Mexico. Um, I can't pronounce it. It's about 17 letters and it starts with a CH and there's a couple of Q's and a couple of T's in it. Um, I think I have that one on the link tree. The link tree really needs to be cleaned up though. That's why I'm switching to a website. But 33,000 years. So this is 13,000 years ago. It's probably a really cool find, but it doesn't tell me anything about pushing back dating or anything like that. And that's why I'm it's not something I'm going to study. So I'm not sure what you want me to talk about with it, but I have seen a couple people talking about it. Um, I just don't know. Lagoon, I'm not sure. I don't know. It had to look at the genetics to be able to see if that has to do with something else other than just typical human beings, right? Their trolls heard us talking. Okay, awesome. I think that's everything. Oh, what are my degrees in? I have an AA in radiography and I have a BA in anthropology from Portland State. Um, I'm not going to go further, most likely. And the reason is because I never thought that I needed Western academic education to go anywhere because I can research on my own, right? All Western academic education teaches me is how to value sources and then just gives me information, right? It teaches me how to figure out sources, and then it teaches me how to work within Western academic education. It doesn't teach me how to do anything I don't already do and I can't already do, right? And so I have no need to go further and to pay money for it. Um, and I don't want to work within it anyways, right? Like I don't plan on ever working again. I'll be real. I have VA and it's a base bare minimum living, but I can live base bare minimum. I grew up dirt floor poor. I'm okay with that, right? I will have $50 left after buying food for a month and I will send it to somebody else. That's just the way I operate. I am good being broke, happy in it, don't need it. I'm fine. So hopefully I will never fucking work again because it's a problem. This society, this capitalism, valuing me based on what you can exploit out of me, I'm done. I've been exploited enough. Done. You should not think that I should break my body for $15 an hour. Done. So, I probably won't go further because that's really the only reason that I would need to go further is for, working within these fields, and I won't. Um, but I will study and I will impart education and information. And I did get the degrees because of the fact, um, to be heard. Those letters behind your name gives you the ability to be heard, unfortunately, within today's society. And while I don't have to work in it completely, it does help. Not only that, but I feel like they don't want to blame the rich people. Not only you're right. I am Portland area. Um, not only that, but I feel like they don't want to blame the rich people. And I agree with that. I think that this idea that the rich people are at fault, everybody is shying away from it. But I was talking with my partner tonight, and I try not to talk about these things on here so that I don't end up with a ban. But I was talking to my partner tonight, and my partner and I were talking about whether or not there's going to be, something happening within this country. And I made the point that, you know, uh, we're really at this tipping point as a culture and as a society that so many other countries have had that tipping point and have pushed and th- thrown out their bankers, thrown out their colonizers, done different things. And that this tipping point is something we've seen before in the past. Is something that comes in cycles. We're already late for it. And we were talking about whether or not, because I believe it can be done bloodlessly. I totally believe that I could bloodlessly reset the government, not overthrow it, but reset the government. Totally believe I could do it. But um, I don't want to be a revolutionary because that's death, and I don't want to die for that, right? I'd like to live a little longer. So we were talking about that, and he was like, "Well, I don't think this generation is up for the blood that would actually happen." He said, "I don't think this generation is really, like they think that they are, but I don't think that they are." And he was talking about, the 90s in LA, which is where he was at, and in the 90s. And he was talking about, some of the things that we think is going to happen, but when somebody just absolutely open fires, it becomes a whole different situation. And I'm a war vet, but I've never killed somebody, and I've never watched somebody die next to me. I've watched people die, but I've watched people die as a medic, like somebody as a medic's not somebody I was related to, not some, like in an ER, right? And so I was like, because he's like, it changes in that moment. And I'm like, it totally changes. I totally get that. And I totally agree. But I would state that every single one of us changed in that moment. And every single one of us thought we were going to be fine. We put in the money, we had put in the effort, not the money, but we put in the effort, we put in the time, we had gotten our stance, picked out our badge, every single one of us. And when the blood happens, when the death happens, that shift happens in that moment. And every single one of us that I know chose to move forward. Some are going to choose to move back. But the kids in this generation are not only ready for a revolution, but they are biting at the bit. I'm like, I can do it bloodlessly. And they're like, I'll take the blood. And I've been told that. Like, I'm like, I can do it bloodlessly. I know we can do this bloodlessly. And they're like, I'll take the blood. I'm done. And the reason is eat the fucking rich. And I sat in on a live for a hot minute today just to see what somebody was saying, where they were talking about minimum wage should not be raised. Everybody should have to pay off their student loans. Abortion should be legal. That was a positive. And they try to explain to me how they, as a fucking 20 something, have been able to pay off their student loans. And so that means everybody should. And minimum wage should only be for somebody who's entry level 16 to 18. I said, so does that mean you want to put a cap on the age for minimum wage? Oh, no, no, no. We don't need a cap on the age for minimum wage. Like, some of the younger generation don't get it. But the ones who do, they ain't fucking having this. That's why they're quitting the workforce in droves. That's why they're not fucking buying it anymore. So I'm ready. And, while I really want it to be bloodless, I totally agree with the theory eat the rich. The motherfuckers are hoarders. Why do we get pissed at people who hoard newspapers? It's a fucking newspaper. Why aren't we pissed at the people who hoard fucking stacks of green? They have more money than they can spend in 20,000 of their lifetimes. Why aren't we angry at them? Why am I the problem? Why is the guy down the street the problem? Why is the immigrant the problem? Why isn't it the fucking stacks that's the problem? Why do we let people hoard? Hoarding is not natural or innate to us. Hoarding comes from lack. People hoard because they've been without. When you have been without, you hoard because you know you're going to be without again and the other shoe is going to drop. So you're going to save it. So when you're out again, you've got it right there. That's why you hoard. It is not natural to the human nature. Why we let these people do this shit? It's nasty. It's disgusting. It's unethical. Eat the rich. Down. What do I know about indigenous? We weren't talking about indigenous within here. I am indigenous though. Oh, okay. I don't teach anybody about reconnecting to Turtle Island indigeneity. I can teach you about how to reconnect to European indigeneity and find ancient ancestry and ancient indigeneity and indigeneity outside of Turtle Island, but I do not teach any reconnection or thought process within Turtle Island. For anything like that, I always tell people to find their local nation or find the nation that's associated with their DNA or their heritage. Just up front, just because that's my lane. The occipital bun in the Neanderthals is basically like this little bun like this, the back of their skulls. So all of our skulls were shaped like this before. Ours are shaped like this now, but this happens fully at about 40,000 years ago. We start like this. So on this, if this is the back of the skull, you see that there's this little bun right about here, like right at the very base of it here. And it just kind of buns out a little bit. And it looks like a bun, like you put a cinnamon bun on their back of their head. The book will be out Friday, or not Friday, by the end of the week. I'm not saying Friday, that's my goal, but I want to make sure because I'm having people look at it and edit it. Um, and I'm going through and I need it after it's edited. I want to do a rewrite to make sure that I have everything in, and then it'll probably need another edit. So I'm hoping to rewrite it tomorrow morning and then probably get through a couple more. So between Friday and Sunday. Um, and it is the first in the series, and this is on the right to life. Um, I don't think we need an economic system. I don't think we have need for it. I think that we have certain things that are rights that we should have access to, and that everything else is fluff. And as I will state in my thing, I think that things like food and shelter are both basic human rights because they both have to do with the right to life. Once you meet those needs, then your creativity is your trade. So if I enjoy beading all the time, then beading is what I barter. I have these really beautiful earrings. Actually, these are an indigenous creator. All my earrings are really indigenous creators that are friends of mine. Where are my sealskins? These are from. Oh God, I've got to get her name up. It's not on here. It's on Facebook. So I might, and I bartered these. Like most of my stuff, I've bartered like that. So uh, your talents, the things that you love, the things that you follow, those are the things that you bring to the whole, to the collective. And when you're bringing something to the whole, to the community, to the collective, you don't need an economy. An economy is so somebody doesn't have to do something. An economy is so somebody can sit on their ass and everybody else can do the work for them, right? And so it's not about so if all your so yeah, it'll be in the book. It'll be in the book. And it's the first. So this is on the right to life. And then we'll go further into the next is the right to liberty. I'm not doing the pursuit of happiness because that's a uniquely American right. I will be focusing on world UN rights. Um, so this is the right to life, and it goes over the basic needs for the right to life, and it goes over, what some of that shit means. This will be out by Sunday at the latest, hopefully Friday. Um, Everything else is getting a real update. The website went down because Spotify and I didn't react right. Um, but I do have a Spotify or not Spotify, Shopify. I do have a Shopify up and going. My logo should be done. I think it was actually just sent to me soon. And so once that's done, then Shopify will be up. That will be something that costs money because it's a printify thing and it will just be phrases on t-shirts with the logo. The book again will be free and all of the printings, all of the educational content will always be free. I appreciate the subscriptions. I appreciate the Patreons, and absolutely can use them, and never going to to shy away from them or be dishonest about that. But all educational content will always be free, just because to me that's the most important thing. Food grown, yeah, it will be in there. It will be in there. All of it roots in land back though. Always, it's always going to, sorry. Animistic thought process is always gonna be the best. A balanced ecosphere and biome is always gonna be the best. Um, so I'm going to leave. I'm like half an hour past my time of what I was planning. I'm gonna go ahead and turn on the comments again for just a couple minutes before I leave. Um, well, I think we need too much space these days, and we don't need that much space. So if we don't have that much space and we can do a vertical did you see that they did an AI tree? AI built a tree that or created a tree that grows around apartment building, like around apartments, so that you can have your apartment in a living, growing tree, so that your entire, like biosphere is a part of this living element, right? Um, there's so many different ways. There's like living buildings in Asia where like all of the sides of the building is all vertical gardening. Like there's so much stuff that we can do to create food abundance while maintaining honorable harvest, which means never take more than you need. Like, yes, it's harvest time, but don't go pick all the apples off the fucking tree. Pick enough, right? Um, and also sustain us in a healthier manner than we're being sustained now because wheat is in everything currently. Everything. It's why we're having gluten intolerance because we're given too much of it. When all you're eating is wheat and wheat byproducts, your mononutrition is going to fuck your body up, right? So, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You're so welcome, Katie. Food waste is ridiculous. Not only that, but like here in the United States, we have food deserts and we have spaces where people are starving, and yet still the farmers are throwing out the vast majority of their food because it doesn't look pretty, you know? Yeah. Okay. So again, we will be back 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Friday morning. My pronouns are he, she, and we. I use we a lot actually when referring to myself, or is a lot when referring to myself. We'll be back Friday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Uh, And we will be discussing the first of 4 lives, all on the same subject and the same topic of, art and jewelry within Neanderthals. The website should be up by tomorrow. The, Shopify should be up relatively soon. And then the book will be out by Sunday. I'm not having sinus issue. I have long COVID and I have, like, asthma issues. Um, Absolutely got some issues with that. He, she, and we. Um, you would say dual gendered. I say two spirit, which is close practice, because it embodies more than just gender. But I embody both the masculine and the feminine within me. And sometimes I feel masculine and sometimes I feel feminine. Like sometimes those are, and when I feel masculine, my body shifts. Like the feel and the sense of my body shifts into a masculine feeling, interaction, almost like phantom limb. And I identify as both, and none and all. Uh, so that is why he and she, because I never expect anybody to be able to identify from your look what I feel like, because I also am aware that pink and lace and velvet and makeup all start male. So, um, and I use we because I believe that we are all interconnected. Uh, Science tells us that we are all energy, and science tells us that energy is all interconnected. And so, therefore, I believe in that communal thought process that everything that I do affects you, and everything that you do affects me. And anytime I hurt you, I hurt myself. I don't think of it as a karmatic thing. I think of it as the fact that we are all the same energy. Science has proven it. So that's why I use we. Mhm. Yeah, Wick sucks. Thank you, Freya. Okay, I am going to take off. Yeah, for me, that I don't even remember where I heard it. It was sometime during 2020 when we were all in the middle of downtown, and I believe because of the conversation that it was another Indigenous person that stated it. But when I heard that, it validated a lot for me, and so that's why I use it. It's not that we're not supposed to eat wheat, it's that we're not supposed to monolithically eat wheat. So if your cracker is wheat and your bread is wheat and your cereal is wheat and half of the sandwich that you eat and the breading that you put on your meat and the corn, or not the corn syrup, the saturated hydrogenated stuff that you've got in this food, and then you're eating a bunch of chips and that are all wheat based. You have so many different things that you're tying in that are all this mono food. We have 2 or 3 things actually that we're using: wheat, corn, and rice. And we've become very mono food with them. And so many of our products are all made from them. And so you might go a whole day and very few of the things that you eat are actually things of substance other than carbs. You might not get any animal protein. You might get very few vitamins and minerals from vegetables or fruits, right? Because pasta, right? Because everything that you're eating is a grain base of 1 or 2 of these, because most of us, don't eat all 3 of them. We might choose like rice flour and have a whole bunch of rice. Some of us do, but if we're eating a bunch of stuff of one particular grain, we're usually eating, or if we're eating a bunch of grain stuff, we're usually eating a bunch of stuff of one particular grain. And so you get very mono about it, and it causes problems. It causes things like diabetes. It's one of the problems with diabetes is because you have this massive intake of carbs without protein, right? And so there's a lot of, oh, hey, beautiful. There's a lot. And hello, Gong. I saw that pop up. There's a lot. of issues with eating very monolithically. Niya, the word Naya. Somebody asked me about a find that was a girl in a cave in Mexico called Naya. That's probably what I meant. It's also why we have gluten intolerance. You only develop allergies after you've been exposed to something, right? So if you're not exposed, and it's usually overexposure or exposure early that causes an allergy. Like a lot of times, if you give a child peanut before 6 months, they'll develop a peanut allergy. Same thing if you're giving a child like rice cereal and stuff like that way too early, or if you're giving them foods that they shouldn't have way too early. And the same things with like a bee sting. Your first bee sting develops the allergy. Your second bee sting is when you're going to have the reaction. Um, my only allergic reactions are to medicines, and to antibiotics, and those happen after you've been exposed to those antibiotics repetitively. And so we see that a lot of allergic reactions come from repetitive exposure or early exposure or heavy exposure. And so we're seeing this gluten reaction really comes from the fact that we're just eating so much fucking wheat in our diet. Mhm. Okay, I'm going to take off, everybody. I will. I did take, well, not too much antibiotics. Pregnancy will cause it too. Pregnancy will cause your body to switch. Uh, right after I had my last child, I had a urinary tract infection and took an antibiotic. I get frequent urinary tract infections. Took an antibiotic for the urinary tract infection and developed an allergic reaction. I was 27. It was the first allergic reaction I'd ever had in my life. And now I get allergic reactions to different antibiotics. I've had allergic reactions to two different antibiotics. The Y chromosome was already fading. That's why it's disappearing. It started as an X. It's already lost one of its legs and half of two others. It's been fading the whole time. That's why it's disappearing. Okay, I'm out. Have a great night, you guys. Um, I will be back Monday morning at 8 a.m. Sorry, Friday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Times. Bye. Good night. Sleep sweet. Have a great one. Bye, YouTube. So great you are over here. You can call me Auntie if you want. I'm headed into crone and I really like crone too. Grandma, things like that. More is mother's mother in Swedish. And I love that. Widda to me is kind of like an honorific like that too, though. So whatever you feel like, you're free. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. Have a good night, you guys.